right, welcome, hello. Thank you all for being here. Phil just reminded me about phones, which is a good call. That if anybody hasn't silenced their phone, if you want to do that now, that would be great. Feels like it's been a quick 2 weeks and we're here again. This is good. It's so good to see you all in person. Thank you for coming tonight. It's wonderful. So this is our first event that we've chosen to do in person only, but we are going to continue recording our offerings just because we've built up quite a library on our website and want to continue populating that with great speakers who come to join us and share that information, and for those who can't be here tonight, but great that you all are able to join us. So just want to welcome you all officially and take a moment to arrive in your presence. Before we get started, I would like to just offer that invite, what it means for you to arrive tonight, maybe checking in with yourself and just notice how you feel arriving here in the building and the effort that maybe it took to arrive here tonight. Checking in with the body, the breath. Coming into this room together, all of us united to share in the teachings and the wisdom learnings. And before we get started sharing these teachings, it's important that we acknowledge and remember the importance of reconciliation. And in the spirit of respect and reciprocity and truth, we honor and acknowledge the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina Nations, Stoney and Nakoda Nations. This territory is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. We remember, we acknowledge. And for those of you who have joined us in the past, glad you could be here. If you're new or if you've joined us with a friend, we're glad to see some new faces. All of our events, just a reminder, are the first and third Thursday of every month. And I'm gesturing to Dr. Phil Bluestein, our founder here. We've made the intention that we would like to have all of our events in person now. However, we do remind you that if you have any sort of symptoms of a cold or anything that you feel you might want to just stay home, we would appreciate. Keep us all healthy and well. So thank you for just acknowledging that. In the weeks between our talks, like I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to catch up on previous talks or videos, please visit our website. You'll find lots of great resources there. Coming up, the first Thursday of October, we have Dr. Alan Donsky, and it is a mindful look at experiencing life, if you can join us for that. This presentation will explore the common view that our life consists of a separate physical body that has discrete thoughts, feelings, and experiences. When our body, our being, and what we do starts to merge, it leads to a greater wisdom, sustainability, and flourishing. And the second Thursday of October, we have Mary Wallace, and her topic is, when is a story not a story? So people have always relied on stories to define themselves and explain the world, but stories can also be a hindrance to insight. What happens if we consider the end of our reliance on narrative as the true beginning of the spiritual life? And finally, the last one I want to share with you is the 5 steps to freedom. And that is the first Thursday of November. And that's with Dr. Leslie Elstad. In the process of developing a mindfulness meditation practice, we will experience a variety of obstacles to our eventual freedom. In this session, we will explore a 5-step process for meeting our challenges: patience, letting be, interest, love, and spaciousness. So 3 really great topics that will be covered in the coming weeks. We hope you can return and join us. And a note on that, while many of these topics really do call to us to explore our own personal stories and our journeys within that, I just want to remind us all that these talks, these offerings, this wisdom that's being brought is really an intention of education and reflection. And so we just offer the invite that we trust that you really are getting the support you need outside of this, and that this really isn't our place to bring our personal experiences, but just to pump the brain, pump the heart, get us thinking about our own understanding. So with that, tonight, I am happy to be here with Stacey Madden. Stacey and I know each other previously. We both are yoga teachers, and we used to teach together at Yoga MCC. I want to say back in the day.
Feels like a long time ago now.
It feels like a very long time ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Yeah, it's been a while. And we both really, I think, when I think of your style as a yoga teacher and mine, I think you always had a beautiful offering in the call for embodiment through your practices and trauma informed. And Stacey's classes were always really special, and her students would be there lined up. It's like, okay, Stacey's teaching, I'm there for it. So she's a wonderful teacher, and tonight will be no different. So Stacey is a registered somatic movement educator, trauma-informed yoga meditation teacher, and a pelvic health professional. Stacey is certified in mind-body therapy, somatic experiencing, interpersonal neurobiology, and as a pelvic fascia trainer. See why she's so good? She offers a whole person inclusive approach to emotional health and physical well-being. Blending a rich tapestry of modalities and practical experience, Stacey endeavors to share what it means to be an integrated and embodied human. That's good. That's good. And so tonight's session, she will delve into the profound connection between the mind and the body, discovering how our physical experiences influence our emotional well-being and cognitive processes. So welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And over to you.
Thank you for having me. I guess we'll switch seats. Is it okay? Would you rather me have my tea on the floor? If I have it up here, is it too close to the tack?
I think we should be okay.
Are you okay if I have it on the table? Some people get a little bit worried about having like liquids loose by technology. I have children. We get a little careful about liquid and computers. Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure.
It's nice to be in person.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Thanks for having me, Christine. Thanks for the introduction. You have some really excellent offerings coming up, by the sounds of it, every other Thursday. And I'm getting the sense that this is a somewhat regular group that comes together too. Yeah, great. So I thought that we would kind of blend experiences tonight, where we would start with something experiential, and then we'll move into sort of discussing why we would do that or what we're noticing potentially. I'll invite you to notice what might be coming up or down for you. Maybe we'll do another experiential process, and then we'll notice afterwards. And if I have time, I usually over deliver. If I have time at the end, we'll do a final sort of sit meditation practice with what we've gone through together this evening. The invitation with whatever we're doing is that choice is more important than pushing through and doing the practices. We're not doing yoga. You don't have to get out of your chair. But if you have an inner no to what I'm offering or suggesting, we respect the no. So choosing is more important than doing. Your choice is trusted and respected in the somatic process. We've all learned enough overwhelm and overdrive and override. We've all learned how to override things. So rather than being experts at pushing through, what if we started to develop an expertise at being with and making a choice? So the invitation, after I've said all of those words and what do they really mean, are what do you notice in your body right now is this idea that you get to choose. And you can say no, anything that I offer. What do you notice in your physical body? I'm not going to look, because then it looks like I'm looking at something specific. I'm just going to look at the ceiling as you consider that. So a common feeling when I invite people into what do you notice in your body is, I don't know. Nothing? What should I be noticing? For some people, when we start to introspect, all of a sudden it's a lot. Like, oh, yeah, I've got a lot actually happening inside of my system. So let's try a practice, if you wish, if you want, where we're just going to receive some support. So just noticing what that word support, how that lands for you. Receiving support. What does that feel like? And notice you might be really thinking about what that would mean, the meaning of that, the contextualization of that. So here's the invitation if you wish, and you can opt out personally at any time, choosing more important than doing. You're invited to notice the chair underneath you. And you're invited to notice the seat behind you, the seat back. And the invitation becomes, is there a way that the chair can support you a little more so that you can work a little less at just being right here, right now? Something as neutral as a chair. Are there parts of you that really enjoy leaning back and getting a bit heavier? Are there other parts of you that resist receiving some support? If you're beginning to feel like your body's a little more supported just simply by the chair underneath you, what might happen to the way you're breathing? Would you like to sense the floor beneath the chair? Can you sense the floor supporting the seat? Can you receive the support of the floor? With this idea of sensing, can you sense the room around you? Can you sense the door where you came in, or the space where you got tea? Can you sense the ceiling above your head? What happens if you consider receiving the support of the space, of the room? What happens to your body? What happens to your breath? So check in with the parts that might feel really helpful being supported and sensing a neutral support, like the chair, the floor, and the space. Notice how your body tells you that it might be helpful. And you might notice the parts of your experience and of yourself that really resist maybe slowing down and feeling supported. Maybe there's parts of you that are like feeling a little like frantic at the idea of maybe relaxing. And all of those parts are welcome. One's not good and one's not bad. They're all welcome. So in this quiet, maybe somewhat supportive or grounded moment, take some time just to decide how you might want the rest of the evening to unfold for you. Yeah, and then when you feel ready, you might take a couple of breaths and you might be ready to move your shoulders. Maybe some movement wants to show up now. Maybe you're ready to open your eyes or wobble your neck around a little bit. I'm just returning now to this moment. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, I'm glad to see everybody here. It really feels like we're all here now. All of our parts are here, our whole body's here. You know, it's kind of a bit later in the day, so some of us might feel really downregulated. Like maybe some of you are like, I'm not sure I caught everything you said. I might have fallen asleep. Welcome to rest. Yeah, welcome that into. And you might be ready now to give yourself a little bit of movement. Like maybe you're like, yeah, kind of receiving support. Maybe I felt a little stiff, so you're invited to move your shoulders and wobble your head or wiggle. So the exploration this evening and the invitation is embodied mindfulness, which seems almost like a little bit of a juxtaposition because we're fundamentally embodied. We're not ever, well, really disembodied. We're in this being, this organism. But in some ways, we've sort of siloed parts of our experience, our felt experience, our lived experience, and even our mindful experience by kind of like living life with this imaginary little dotted line across our neck. And we tend to think that we live through the world this way. Everything I think, I see, I see. Sometimes I check in, uh-oh, something's gone wrong. That's often when we check, my back hurts. And sometimes we'll check into our physical process. Like, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need to move or wiggle a little bit? Am I tired? Other times we realize that we haven't checked in with our physical process and we're dehydrated or overtired. But where have we lost the relationship between what and how we think and the embodied process of how we actually show up and feel? So this is kind of the practice and the investigation of somatics. Somatics really fundamentally weans itself down to meaning of the body, of the body. But when we're exploring somatics, particularly from the framework that I operate through primarily, which is somatic experiencing, is we're getting really curious about, is this physical system just a meat suit that like carries my cognition around so it can entertain my brain? Or is this system also my mind? And we start to turn things, assumptions around that we've had for a long time. And if this was a longer discussion and a longer talk, I might start talking a little bit about post-war trauma and colonialism and trauma in the body for many, many populations of people, and how starting to live up and out of the body maybe felt safer than being able to be in and living through the body and through the embodied experience. So when we start to operate through somatics framework and perspective, we get really curious about not just the physical manifestation functioning of the body and these siloed, sectioned systems. We actually start to get curious about, what does my body actually feel? What are the sensations of this lived embodied experience? What are the sensations? Because our first language is sensation. Our very first language is feeling something. Our first language is touch. Our first language is sound. It's warmth, it's cold, it's hunger, it's satiation, it's attunement and connection. Those first moments of our life start to inform our nervous system. Our nervous system is born relatively incomplete. We're born pretty early compared to other mammals. In fact, it's considered the 3 months after birth, postnatal, is the 4th trimester, but we just happen to be out of the gestating body. So we're born with this nervous system that is consistently sensing, and that's the information in our earliest development, in our earliest life, and it starts to tell us what the world is about. Our second language is emotion. Emotion expressing need, crying, laughing, looking away, reaching out, being accepted and accepting it. The final language that we learn is spoken word and or mental cognition and mind. Internal language really is the final language. But the brain is the most important organ according to the brain. According to itself, because it has the function of language. So then it's decided to tell all of these other ways of knowing and all of these other ways of connecting and feeling and sensing, I'm the most important thing because I can think and talk, and I'm going to direct you, meaning the rest of the systems. So what if, and I'm not asking any of you to believe anything I say tonight. Please don't throw anything at me. I think you're a nice group and you won't. But what if your mind was actually just telling you a story based on the experience of your nervous system? Yeah, like what if your mind is actually, and that doesn't mean that the story and the narrative is wrong or untrue, but what if it's more of a reflection of your lived reality than the director of your lived reality? This is some touchy ground to work on in a mindfulness group. Uh-oh. I'm going to introduce a little bit tonight some polyvagal theory, as coined, designed, taught extensively by Dr. Stephen Porges. And maybe some of you are familiar and some of you are not, and that's okay, because we're just going to do a little touch in, and then we'll do some polyvagal practice. The polyvagal part of our nervous system, it's not the most important part. Like, it's getting a lot of hype lately. There's a lot of debate out there about, like, is it true? Is it not true? How important is it? It's very heated out there in the somatics world right now. But because it's so present in the body, it's one of the easiest ways to access our nervous system. So the vagus nerve, vagus, not like Las Vegas, jackpot, but vagus from Latin meaning wandering, exits from the spinal cord out of your C-spine, and it comes out and it spreads itself out. Sometimes I'll kind of demonstrate like this. It innervates the muscles of the middle ear and the movement of the ear. Our ears do still actually move. It's a vestigial leftover, but our ears still want to operate by movement. This vagus nerve comes out, it innervates the muscles of the eyes, the eyelids, the irrigation canal, the optical nerve, and then the muscles around the eyes. It innervates around the mouth and the lips, like this, into the lips, behind the lips, and the tongue, the base of the tongue. It innervates parts of the laryngeal diaphragm, the vocal cords, the epiglottis. It influences even some of the muscles around the hyaloid, this floating bone in the throat. It then spreads itself down, it innervates the heart. In fact, in humans, there's a unique connection between the heart and the eyes with the vagus nerve. It connects the heart and the eyes. It touches the heart, and then it spreads itself all the way down through your body. It touches every organ, and 83% of its afferent fibers, meaning the fibers that take information in and send to the brain, 83% of the fibers of this massive internal network are in the lining of the gut. The question of the vagus nerve, this vagus pathway, is fundamentally, kind of reductively, am I safe? Am I not safe? Am I safe? Am I not safe? Am I safe or am I not safe? This is called neuroception. And it neurocepts inside of the body and outside of the body. So it's sending this massive information through this fibrous network through your body, primarily the gut, but everywhere else, all the way up into your brain, right into the hypothalamus. For those of you familiar with Dan Siegel's model of the brain, right to the hypothalamus. Boom, all of this message continually throughout your day, unconsciously, but busy, very busy. Am I safe or am I not safe? Then the hypothalamus, here's your frontal cortex, big part of the brain. Here's your hypothalamus. This part says decision maker, right? Up here. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, shut down, collapse. All these different words. Most people have heard of fight, flight, freeze. We're going to nuance that a little bit tonight. Fight, flight, fight, high tone freeze, low tone freeze, shut down, collapse, vasovagal. And our body responds, oh, I'm going to shut down, or I'm going to run and I'm going to get ready to go. Put my hand puppet away for the time being. Frontal cortex, hypothalamus, insula is back there too. Maybe cerebellum, brainstem, right through here. That was the model, right here. So here's the brain of my hand going, I'm really important. I'm the brain. I have all the language. And yet it's taking in all of this information consistently through the body, up. Lots from the gut, lots from the gut. And then it's making some rapid decisions about how we perceive ourselves and if we're safe. Unconsciously, rapid fire. And sometimes that becomes a little bit of like the lens through which we experience the world. And it feels like reality. And it is a physical felt state reality. So what's all of this about like the vagus nerve and the mind have to do with mindfulness? Mindfulness sometimes is a state that we can arrive at as a natural embodied way of being and existing when this part of our nervous system actually anticipates safety and feels safe. And I don't think a lot of us have felt safe for a few years at least now. And it's a big ask. And a lot of us haven't felt safe, maybe for a while. And maybe a lot of us haven't felt safe since we were kids. And maybe some of us have never really felt safe. So this part of the nervous system works and works and works and works and works, trying to assess, am I safe? Am I not safe? Is this food safe or is that not safe? Is my heart rate safe? Is my breathing safe? Is the breath? So with a body that can be so busy, with a nervous system that's consistently sending messages up into the brain and then the brain making rapid decisions back into the body, maybe it's been really helpful for a lot of us to cut off right here and just kind of try to focus on the mind. But maybe we feel like we've only gotten so far. Like I can only get so far. I want to meditate. I want to have a deeper meditation experience. Or when I sit down to do mindfulness, I forget everything. That's so common, right? Okay, I'm gonna spend some mindful moments. What's that shopping list again? And it's not a fault of a meditation practice or teacher. It's not the fault of the body. But if the body is loaded and busy, and if the vagus nerve is really working, it can be really, really difficult to sit and settle and actually turn within. So how do we know if our vagus nerve is keeping us from feeling like fully connected, fully safe, fully attuned to self and to other? Let's do a little practice. Let's see what's happening with our vagus nerves tonight. Do you want to? You could remember, choosing is way more important than doing. Bless you. So the vagus nerve, it's not the most important person in the symphony of the nervous system. It's just so present. It's like the horn section. They're so loud. Like they really give a lot of juice to the orchestra, right? But they're not the most important, but they're pretty jazzy. Same with the vagus nerve. It travels everywhere. So one of my favorite vagal practices is massaging the tragus, or this little part of your ear. Some people get it pierced sometimes if they have migraines. It's called tragus piercing, that little part right here. And so you might just like notice that little flap right here. You could try one and try the other. And if you kind of get like a little curious about the tragus, you might notice that it's actually a mobile piece of cartilage. Like there's some mobility to it. It kind of wants to move. So a lot of the vagal pathway is on the left side, but you get to choose because the vagus nerve kind of travels everywhere. If you want, you might choose the left side and you can lean your head over and you just kind of mobilize and massage this little piece of cartilage. Nothing should hurt. Don't let anything hurt. You might let your jaw go a bit soft, or your eyes. And then maybe to really ask the vagus nerve to feel settled, and this upper pathway will hum. If we were to hum as we're kind of mobilizing, maybe massaging a little bit, this little flap. And you don't have to hum, you can if you want. But if you want, it'll sound a little bit like this. Three always seems to be like the magic number, right? You feel like you're falling asleep now. And then you just, when you're ready, you might just let go. You might bring your head up, maybe you want to wobble your head around a little bit. And then you're invited to sit just a little heavier again. And once again, if it was helpful, can you receive the support from the chair? Is there a way to allow yourself to not have to work so hard at being right here, right now? And you're invited to check into your breathing. Yeah, you might even notice, how does the ear feel that you mobilized that little tragus piece compared to the ear that you did not? So just giving yourself a chance to notice one ear versus the other ear. Can you sense anything different between your ears? Maybe warmth. Sometimes that little cartilage piece, after we've mobilized it and hummed a bit, it might even feel like that side's a little more enlivened. Yeah, it's almost hard to put words to this when we start to move into the language of sensation. We've not often been gifted somatic literacy. So just kind of noticing. And then here's a way to sort of explore this further. And there's no guarantee, we're all coming in loaded with different histories and days and all sorts of things. But a way to sort of check in to see if the vagus nerve was maybe down-regulated or soothed in some way would be to maybe tip your head from side to side and maybe notice how your head moves from the side where you just hung out with that weird little piece of cartilage versus the side that you did not. You might even turn your head from side to side, doing that kind of no motion, nice and slow. And does it feel the same turning each direction, or has anything changed on the side where you mobilize the vagus nerve? This could just be little tiny movements too. Yeah, and then coming back to the now, coming back to the room, maybe wiggling again a little bit. So the vagus nerve, kind of particularly, I could just go on and on about the vagus nerve because it's so rich with information, and embodied knowing. But the vagus nerve, when it's assessing in this upper pathway, the supradiaphragmatic pathway about safety, or am I safe, am I not safe? Unconscious thoughts, we're not consciously thinking, am I safe, am I not safe? Most of us, some of us may be. But it will make some rapid decisions about how to affect our physiology. And one of the ways that it affects the physiology for some people, I see it mostly in children, is the muscles of the middle ear. So the vagus nerve innervates and influences the muscles of our middle ear. If we're neurocepting danger in some way, or disorder or discomfort or overstimulation, the list could go on and on, you choose the words. Sometimes what the vagus nerve will do in the ear is it will turn off the muscles to the middle ear, and we will no longer be effectively attuned to human vocal range. But we will be highly attuned to high pitch sounds and low pitch sounds. So we'll be highly attuned to high pitch threat sounds or low pitch threat sounds. So how does this show up? You're like, well, like, what does that really mean if someone's like attuned to high pitch or low pitch and their muscles of their middle ear are off? This is where I frequently will see it most often with children. It's a grade 2 classroom. They're all around 6, 7 years old. Maybe they've been at centers or something, right? My bracelet caught my tea bag there. Maybe they're at centers and then the teacher's calling them over for carpet time. Okay, carpet time, come on everybody, come on over to carpet, says the teacher. And there's maybe one little boy who just isn't going to stop at the Lego table or sand table or whatever, painting or whatever he's doing, right? And the teacher says, you know, give me a modern name, because I'm gonna use like a name from the 70s from when I was born. Like, Jason, come here, come to carpet time. Totally ignores the teacher. Jason, carpet time. Thanks, Christine, sorry about that. Carpet time. Totally ignores the teacher. Jason, carpet time. Why are you ignoring me? And then the little boy might orient to the teacher. Oh, and then he's maybe in trouble. He was not listening. Why aren't you listening? Crisscross applesauce. Now this kid's all dysregulated. Like, what's happening? The room has changed. So what'll happen is, you know, the teacher talks to the parents, maybe take your son to the doctor, maybe he needs some hearing tests or something, comes back from the doctor, no, hearing's fine, physiologically, no problem in the ear, everything's great. What else might be happening? We don't know. You know, maybe he has a hard time listening all the time, or at certain times, then he has outbursts, then he's upset, it's hard to break, he doesn't seem like emotionally regulated, there's the word, right? That's very happening lately, regulation. But sometimes, like in my practice, what we end up seeing are primarily a lot of the time like little kids who, for whatever reason, I don't know, might be orienting to threat in some way, unconsciously. And their vagus nerve makes some pretty rapid decisions about, am I safe or am I not safe? And one of the decisions that the brain might make to keep the child safe or to answer the response is to turn off the muscles in the middle ear. And then that little boy can't hear the human vocal range, or that little girl or that little person. They can't hear human vocal range at some parts of the day for a variety of reasons. So what ends up happening Maybe they're kind of getting listed as having oppositional defiance disorder. And I mean, that could be true too, right? Dr. Gabor Mate has a real big pushback against that, if you're familiar with him. I sit in the middle ground. I'm a true Libra. I don't really have an opinion on that either way. I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor. You know, maybe some ADHD diagnosis comes up for that little kid. We don't really know, right? You know, I could never say. But sometimes with the kids that I work with in my practice, we do something like where we'll just stimulate the ear and maybe hum a little bit. The vagus nerve runs this big pathway right here. So sound and speaking is really important to tune the vagus nerve. So let's think about maybe a day-to-day interaction where you can't hear things very clearly, or maybe you can remember a time in your life where you were wondering if you were going through hearing loss, and you go through all these tests and they're like, well, maybe, but it doesn't really show anything biological, physiological, and you might worry, oh no. What happens is we start to worry and there's that stress response. The body's dialing up, the vagus nerve is sending messages to the brain, and the brain makes up a story. What if we have hearing loss? And then it Rolodexes through all these worst case scenarios. But what if we had some simple practices just to bring the vagus nerve back online? And you might have even noticed that by doing a little bit of touching and humming and leaning, something changed in your ability to be in your body. Maybe your head moved a little smoother. Maybe it went over one way a little bit farther than the other way. Maybe you're not really sure what happened. Maybe for some of you, this is not a pathway in your system that's, you know, annotating or notating to danger or threat or neurocepting. So let's try the other side and see if anything else happens. If you want, choosing is more important than doing. In fact, if we had more time, we would just start pretending things and you'd see amazing things in the body, but that's a whole other day. So you just take your hands over to that other side, not that other tragus. So at one point in time, if you want to jump on the train of human evolution, and I don't ask anyone to believe that, but polyvagal theory is a phylogenetic history of the body, but anyway. But at one point in time, as you just touch and make contact with this little piece of cartilage, and you might massage it or you might circle it around, our ears actually moved to hear sound. Like we actually would and our ears still do move a little bit. There is still some mobilization to ears when we're hearing things. But we've kind of socialized our way out of that. So just give this little, notice that this part of yours is actually mobile. It moves. Maybe your fingers are cold and this feels warm. Maybe you can even think about times when your ears burnt and there's that, you know, that colloquialism, like, oh, someone's talking about me. Like, is that's the way it goes, right? Someone's talking about me. And then you might even, you know, if you wanted to, give the rest of the ear a little bit of a squeeze. And then staying on that little tragus, that little fold's called your tragus, what would it feel like if you just kind of sat back in your chair, receive some support, let your head lean over again, and we'll just hum again, maybe 3 times. We don't have to sound good humming, just hum to vibrate. And then you might let your head come up if you're ready, and then just rest for a bit. Just have a rest. What are you noticing inside of your body right now? I'm curious, I'm wondering. Do you still feel the same way right now that you did when you first came in and sat down? Yeah. Or have things changed? Pardon me. You might do that little bit of a test again in somatics, in clinical somatics. We do a lot of before and after. We do one side a few times and then notice between the two sides. We'll do the other side. We like to do one side and then the other because our brains that think that they're the most important part of us, and they are really important, but they talk a lot. But our brains love comparison. Our brains love to compare up, down, left, right, good, bad. So in somatics, we do more of what the brain wants to do in this case. So then we go back and we kind of test. We do like a little litmus test. Like I move my head from side to side. How does it feel on this side now compared to before I had touched that tragus? How does the quality of movement feel if I just take my head from side to side? Does it move differently? Do I experience it differently from the inside? Is there more mobilization? Is there just a smoother movement? Do I feel warm? Just kind of checking into those sensations, that first language of sense. Does it make you feel wobbly? You're like, oh, that's that little tragus, right? Yeah. And if you're not experiencing anything, if you're like, that sucks, I don't experience anything, don't worry, because maybe you're not loading your attention here, right? So instead of being like, I'm not experiencing, maybe you're going like, good, that's not where I hold my attention. It's not my tragus. But just take a moment to notice what might have changed in your experience from really gently investigating some little tiny parts of your body that connect to the vagus nerve. Receive some support from the chair again. Settle back if you feel like you're efforting to understand. So what does this have to do with mindfulness? What do these little ear movements in this nerve have to do with creating awareness, becoming aware of awareness itself? How rich does our experience become? What depth changes when we can become aware of awareness itself from every language of our body, from sensation and emotion and thought? We take mindfulness practices from being 1, 2, 3, 4, trying to get to a state of something of awareness, and maybe bit by bit we start to land. We're just there as a default way of being without having to work at it so hard. So this polyvagal theory thing, I like to use Deb Dana. She's a clinician and she uses this idea of a ladder. And at the top of the ladder is something that she and Stephen Porges refer to as safe and social. In other features, other circles, other modalities, they're going to call this like window of tolerance. For our purpose in somatics, we're referring to that as presence. Because we've all tolerated enough, right? Like, no, and regulation, sometimes it's called like emotional regulation. It feels very linear, feels very diagnostic. But what about presence? So I'm going to send some words out to you, and then I'm going to ask you to feel the words from the sensation language of your body, or your emotions, or your thoughts. Regulation. I'm just going to say the word again. Regulation. What do you notice? And what does your body want to do even with the word regulation? Tolerance. What does that word sort of mean to you and your body and your nervous system? Tolerance. Presence. How does your body, how does your nervous system, how do your thoughts or emotions respond to the word presence? Do you notice what happened to your nervous system? Right? Yeah. So yeah, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, not so bad. They show up when we need them, right? How do we come back to presence? Feel the chair beneath you. Give yourself a little wiggle. Invite a breath. You got it. So this top of the ladder idea, it's kind of where everybody wants to be. Present, regulated, safe and social. This is when our digestive system is really operating for most of us pretty functionally, because the vagus nerve is overworking the digestive tract. This is when cardiovascular functioning tends to, we have heart rate variability. We're not stuck too high, we're not stuck too low. This is when we can be intimate, all different levels of intimacy. The space of presence is when we can attune to one another's needs and our own. Presence, regulation, tolerance, whatever works best for you. When we are there, our brain, the most important organ, is totally functioning. Like all parts of us tend to be online for the most part. And that shows up in a way where we don't hang out and harden in hatred. We don't calcify, but we can be angry. But we can come out of anger and be connected again. We can feel sad. We can see something and have compassion online, which is our frontal cortex. Compassion's available to us, but we're not sunk in someone else's grief. We can experience joy, true, full-bodied, nervous system joy, and then we can sleep that night. We're not so activated even by joy that we have difficulty down-regulating back to tolerance, my favorite, presence, or safe and social. Every time we drop down a rung, flight, fight, high tone freeze, low tone freeze, shut down, collapse, it's like a little light switch in our brain turns off. Click, 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 click. And there's not much of our full cognitive functioning when we're kind of in shutdown collapse or we've passed out. But we have to experience each one of these rungs to return to safe and social. We don't get to skip because they're important to our experience as humans. Mindfulness. Mindfulness not so available to us. The brain doesn't perceive it as being important, healthy, or helpful. When we're at the top, mindfulness is a natural state that we can arrive at. So how does this affect thought and perception before we do another final meditation practice? I think I don't have a clock in front of me. Do you want to tell me how we're doing for time? So I'll just keep you here all night long. Oh, it's 7:55. I'm only 5 minutes over.
No, you're not over.
No, you're not over.
You're early.
Oh. Looking at my husband. Never happens. If we have a nervous system that's operating fight, flight, freeze, high tone freeze, low tone freeze, all these words that I said tonight as a baseline function, which most of us do because socially we're asked to always be in this state of hyper production and to never stop. You know, welcome to late stage capitalism and mindfulness, right? When we're stuck in this consistent internal grind of overdo, overproduce, never stop, we're not in a safe and social or present place. It's just not, we're not able to be there. So these messages get sent up to the brain. I'm overworked, I'm overtaxed, I'm burned out, I'm fried, I'm tired. This is too much. I can't keep overriding this. And it's what I call our nervous system as being disorganized. There's a disorganized internal state. And the brain looks down into the nervous system and goes, whoa, I don't even know what's going on in there because nobody's taught me how to feel this. Nobody has ever taught me what to do with this. So I'm going to try to fill in the pieces to try to make sense of what I'm sensing in my body. Because that's what our brains do. They're so great. It's like when we watch a movie. Movies aren't actually like continuous motion, right? They're just little pictures and our brain fills in all the gaps. Amazing. But our brain does that for our internal sensations that we don't understand very well. So the brain will start to fill in these gaps. And now we'll have really complicated narratives about how we think we see the world based on what our nervous system is kind of stuck doing. I'm in grind, I'm in fight flight all the time. You know what? This whole world looks really angry. That guy driving over there really cheesed me off today. I don't like the look of that person over there. I'm not gonna do that. And it starts to reflect in our thought process. The thought process could be right. Maybe that guy is driving like a jerk, and we don't know. But what's happening is the mind is trying to make up a story to match how we feel inside of the body. Particularly with, states that I work with people like anxiety and depression. I work with a lot of people who show up with anxiety physiology and depression physiology. So I work with nervous system physiology. Anxiety physiology is a physiology that is stuck or revved in fight, flight, and high tone freeze. Everything's perceived as threat, and it moves really fast. In fact, I call it the left brain Rolodex. So we're perceiving threat in some way. We're neurocepting it inside of the body, outside of the body. We're taking all this information up into the very, very important brain. The brain, roughly speaking, generally speaking, like, hit me up later with some emails about like, you didn't talk about the insult or something, like I'll take it, but I'm just talking generally. But maybe this part of our left brain, it's like a Rolodex. And you have to be of a certain age to know what a Rolodex is. Because I'll say Rolodex and people have no idea what I'm talking about because they're so young. They're like, maybe I know what that is. I'm like, Google it when you get home. And then you'll know what I'm talking about. Maybe one day I'll get a more high-tech version of this. But roll with me because I think the majority of people in this room know what a Rolodex is. So we perceive threat, and the left brain has this Rolodex, and it does this. Worst case scenarios rapidly. The left brain picks out the very worst case scenario. Da, 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 da. Worst case scenario. The world's ending or something. The right side of the brain, mainly here, pulls in and says, whoa, we're okay. That's not gonna happen. It didn't happen before. Just calm down, take a deep breath, take a look around, you're okay. Use your techniques, right? The right brain comes in and tries to soothe things. And maybe the left brain goes, okay, maybe, yeah, you're right brain. Yeah, okay, we can be logical or like, we can be like creative about this. We can problem solve this. But what happens is a person's physiology has organized itself around that worst case scenario, like it's real. Because the nervous system doesn't know the difference between reality and fantasy. That's why horror movies are so terrifying, even though we know they're not real as adults. Our nervous system is interpreting it as real threat. So now the nervous system has organized itself around threat, even though another part of our brain says, calm down, but the body's going, I can't. Welcome to anxiety. There's again that like rubber stamp of like, you have anxiety. If we could think our way out of anxiety, none of us would have it. People who have anxiety physiology are expert thinkers. We're all really good at thinking about it. If we could think our way out of anxiety, we would, none of us would have it. Instead, we want to feel our way out of anxiety. And we want to identify that fight, flight, or high tone freeze pattern in the body and actually let the body do it. In somatics, we don't pull the opposite direction. Calm down. Because like if you have anxiety, anybody in this room has anxiety, and someone says, calm down, relax, take a deep breath, it revs you up more because you're perceiving it as threat to slow down. So instead what we do is we actually meet the anxiety and we meet the impulse of the body slowly and carefully. So if you want, if you feel like the left brain Rolodex, you can identify with that tonight. And I'm not looking, and this is not diagnostic in the slightest, but maybe you're like, yeah, I get a little rev sometimes. I might get a little anxious sometimes. You might take your feet on the ground and we'll meet the flight response. And are we going to meet the flight response by running? No, that's too much, too fast, too soon, too overwhelming. But we might just tap our toes. A little rhythm. Then you might go faster. Notice what happens when you speed up. Does your breathing change? A little faster. Don't let anything hurt. Choosing is more important than doing. Notice how your shoulders might move. Maybe there's a little bit of extra zhuzh in the body. And then slow down. Notice what happens to your breathing. Some people are choosing no. They're like, I hate this. Disregard. Disregard. And then you just come into stillness. And you rest again in the chair and receive the support of the chair. If that's not your medicine, if that was a no as you were doing it, you just blow it like a dandelion. It's not your medicine now or maybe ever. If it was helpful, just notice how you're feeling in your feet. Notice your legs, if there's some tingling or enervation that might have happened in your legs. Notice what's happening with your breath. What's happening with the Rolodex if you have one of those? Is it still, or has it decided to go slow down a little bit? Notice what you might be feeling in your body. Is your heart rate increased? Is it starting to settle? What's the emotion that you might be feeling? Is there an emotion correlated with what you're noticing in your body? What are your thoughts like? How would it feel to receive the support of the chair underneath you again? Are you once again working really hard or a little harder than you need to at just being here right now? Would it be okay to feel the seat underneath you and the seat behind you? And to rest just a little more. What about those parts earlier on that maybe really love to receive the rest, that really like to feel the chair and to slow down? Take it a little easier. What about the parts that maybe felt a little resistant to rest or slowing down at the beginning? Are they, maybe they're still present, maybe they're not as present. Maybe it doesn't feel like there's disparate experiences in your body now. Maybe it feels like there's less heart work, less resistance versus rest. Maybe it just feels a little more integrated. Taking some time to feel the floor once again beneath the chair, supporting the chair. Sensing the walls all around you, the roof above you. And bringing into your awareness maybe this felt sense of your body and your nervous system, your heart rate, your ears, your eyes. This vagus nerve. And what if the message directed into yourself, possibly, is, I am with you. Into this incredibly intelligent self. I am with you. When you're ready, taking a few slow breaths that feel most comfortable for you. You might be ready to wiggle again and maybe look around the room. Thanks for going on a little bit of like a abbreviated kind of funhouse tour of your vagus nerve tonight. Maybe taking with you, noticing how you sleep tonight. Maybe noticing your relationship with your nervous system, your fight, flight, freeze system after tonight. My name is Stacey Madden. There's a whole bunch of things that go after my name. I'm a human, I'm a body, I'm a system just like you. Thanks for following along with me and getting curious tonight. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. What a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So this is the time where we can turn it to you. Everyone's very present, feels like. So if we wanted to maybe go up to the mind and see if there's any questions that have arrived from this exploration, or maybe an opportunity to ask Stacey a bit more about her practices, and I'm sure she would love to share. So anyone has any questions, thoughts, comments?
I just want to say the depth when you said to feel your body in your chair and the support, and then when you said feel the floor support, I felt it. I felt it immensely. I don't even have words to say how that felt. When you said and then feel the room, I got a little bit claustrophobic and I just kind of opened my eyes like, oh, you're safe. Right? But then it's just letting the body, letting yourself be supported by the chair. I mean, how often do you sit? How many hours a day do you sit? I've never thought to even do that. And then like again, forward, just that was just the depth. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Your whole session was very informative, powerful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the feedback. I'm taking some time to receive that, because I can have a habit of just like feeling uncomfortable and being, okay. But I'm gonna really receive that. Thank you. Thank you. Somatics, we've not been given a somatic literacy, so we often don't have words.
None, and I'm just learning, because everything in my life, external, do. Now it's just like, shut it off. it doesn't need to be there, like just sit and just be and do an exercise like this to just calm yourself, right? And it just, and then you open your eyes and it's just it's a more gentle feeling in a gentle world, right? Like it's just realizing your own self-importance, taking care of yourself, right? We only get one life, this is, you know what I mean? And it's taking care of yourself should be everybody's priority.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard to pour from an empty cup.
Right.
The receiving support is kind of the antidote to just demanding relaxation, or because relaxation can feel like a really big request for nervous systems that maybe have never felt that. But neutral support, a chair is really neutral.
Yeah.
The floor is pretty neutral. Yeah, it can be profound. A lot of somatics is profound in its simplicity. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Stacey, the one part of your discussion that sits with me is our minds and teaching our minds how to explore. And like you were saying, we don't even have the words for it. And when we did the exercise, like with our feet and, feeling through the body, can you talk more about how we support ourselves? Because if, we're at the bottom of the ladder and things have, like you said, been intense for a long time, how do we slowly walk into starting to feel in the body? Like, the toes are a great way, but how in a day-to-day scenario, I'm in a meeting and I feel threatened, how can I help myself?
Yeah, what a great question. Thank you for that, Christine. Yeah, and that idea too of like to kind of work backwards with that, the idea of like sitting in a meeting and feeling threatened, right? Like maybe you're sitting in a meeting and you have like a lump in your throat and you're gonna have the talk and your heart's beating really fast and you're telling your body, calm down, calm down, calm down. And you try to act calm, but you're not really actually there. We start to get a little bit curious about these defensive mechanisms and how adaptive and proportional they are. So in a meeting, if we get that way a little bit, it's not a terrible thing. Like there's sometimes threat in board meetings and like work meetings, right? It's just the nature of the hierarchy. Anyway, I'm not going to go on about that, but I could. So we start to get curious in some ways about defensive mechanisms and adaptations and if they're proportionate to the event or not. So if a person's sort of starting out maybe after a process like this, like how do I go in safely? Like what's the safe exploration? Sometimes we get curious about the spectrum of being a close processor versus a distant processor. And this is the work of Gene Gedlin, who is sort of like one of the grandfathers of body psychology, godfathers of body psychology. And so there's the spectrum. Some people who might be a close processing type of person is someone who can go into their body and have sensations and understand the emotions associated with them. There might even be memories associated with them. They like to feel more than they necessarily want to think about things. A really close processor is someone who drops in and it's an overwhelming amount of information for them. This other end of the spectrum is a distant processor. Distant processing is, I have a body. Like, what do you mean? There's emotions in here? They want to think. Like, how do you feel about that? Well, let me think about that for a while. What's your emotions? I have emotions. And any one of us can be on that spectrum at any given time for lots of different reasons, right? So as I'm saying this, and you're maybe sort of adjudicating where you sort of land on that spectrum of being maybe a close processor, a distant processor. A close processor, someone who moves pretty fast inside the body, has a lot of internal interoceptive information, might want to do more extroceptive practices first. Extroceptive practices might be just feeling the outer edge of the body, feeling more externalized boundaries, the chair, shoulders, arms, skin, or even looking around, like noticing that when there was some threat about the size of the room or perception of like feeling claustrophobic, eyes popped open and externally oriented. External orientation is a nice way because you are moving your body. You don't have to be right in the middle of it. For people who are a little more distant processors, where we're not quite sure how to go in, what do I notice? Sometimes it's helpful, mindfulness practices are really helpful actually to develop interoception. But sometimes it's going in and like recalling a memory when someone might have felt really mad or frustrated. Like the negative emotions are a little more hardwired into us. And then noticing what our body does if we feel angry or frustrated. Like, is there compression around the face? Do my shoulders tighten? Do I feel hot in my gut? And just getting curious about how our body tells us about a memory and how we felt about it. Does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a great exploration of the spectrum, and even like you said, just evaluating our own natural responses, because I would assume there's some habitual things that we're probably all facing in the subconscious mind and how we are responding without awareness to it.
Yeah, absolutely, and when we start to do this work, especially of somatics and sensation, it creates so much more compassion and awareness for other people around us. It's not diagnostic. We're not starting to look at other people and go like, oh, that person's in fight flight. Well, maybe we are a little bit, but we're not telling people that they're having an experience. But when we can actually tap into this and kind of understand where we're at in our nervous system, we're so much more compassionate, because we're like, oh, like everyone's just kind of operating through like some of this stuff too. Maybe they just feel as stuck as I do sometimes. They're not bad. I'm not bad. We're just all really trying to survive here together. How do we thrive? How do we get to thrive together? Some of the ways that I also offer interoceptive practices is I do a lot of infantile movement development practices in classes. So I'll do infant repatterning movement practices with people. This reflex. This is an infant connection reflex, the thumb sweeping down in the curls, the fingers curling around. Deceptively simple. Sometimes it's the reaching and pulling back. Sometimes it's just sweeping across the side of the face. And for some of us, when we return to some of our earliest movement patterns, we start to re-engineer the nervous system back to safety. I won't go on, it'll be a whole other class, but I won't go on. But for a lot of people, some of those earliest safety patterns were interrupted for us for a variety of different reasons. I'll stop there.
So Stacey, just to address the issue of the value of the body, but also the potential danger of the body, in the sense that, and I'd like you to address this, our childhood traumatic memories are stored physically. And if we get into our body and get too close to those trapped memories stored physically, it can actually create some traumatic problems. So could you just address that safety issue of how do we become aware of the fact that, boy, I just can't get near that body because of this? And what do you do in order to address that? What approach do you do in terms of getting close to the trauma?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of different thoughts around that as well. For instance, and I'll just, reference Gabor Mate. He will say, and I don't say I agree with him or disagree with him, but he really operates from the perception that we have natural ways to take us away if it's too close and we're not ready to deal with it yet. That we have natural nervous system and psychological responses that will actually stop us from going into the trauma if we're not ready to actually be with it, the memory of it yet. I can kind of see why he'd say that. I'm not saying that I totally believe that. Maybe some of you follow some of his work in that land. In other practices, like with Bessel van der Kolk or even with Peter Levine, we are not going back into like remembering the past trauma. Tell me about it, remember it, sit with the past, that big moment that was really terrible for you. Because if it's incomplete, it's riding around in the body every day anyway. Like it's pretty present here anyway. So in somatic experiencing, we do a lot of just kind of noticing what's here now. We don't need to go back. If it's processed and integrated, it doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't, but we can notice it in the system. But how do we do this safely? And this is where I'll land in the middle of these different people. For every stored memory that your body has of something that was overwhelming, that was too much, that stole your dignity or took your safety away from you, your body also remembers and stores all of those moments that felt really good, that restored humanity, that got you back in touch with happiness, joy, connection, and attunement. Those also exist in your nervous system. So it seems like a bypass, but it's noticing that your body also stores happiness and joyful moments as much as it will store the trauma. It kind of moves with some of those deeper indigenous thoughts and processes and perspectives of your ancestors gave you more than just intergenerational trauma. They also gave you intergenerational strength. We also have intergenerational strength in our nervous system. But to the question about how do we stay safe, we get to make choices about how close we go to that material. We're habituated to go in and, if you've done some therapy practices or even movement practices and you're wanting to resolve something, we've been habituated to what's the hardest stuff? Oh, it's so uncomfortable, you're feeling resistance, go right into the middle of it, dig around in it. My practice and perspective is your body is telling you something doesn't feel good or doesn't feel right. You have choice. If you have capacity, you might stay on the edge of the feeling. You could stay on the edge of the memory. You could move really far away from it. You could put it on a shelf for another time. Compartmentalization is a beautiful human tactic that often gets undermined. It's a pretty cool thing that we can do. You can come back to it later. You can notice that there's something there. And if it feels too hard to get away from it, you can tell the memory, your younger version of self, the sensation in the body or the emotion arising, I am with you. The I am with you is profoundly effective for sensations and feelings in the body that feel too big or too close to original trauma states. So we're using the adult part of our brain to connect to the feeling, to say, I am with you. Adult me is with this, and we're okay.
Fantastic.
Does that answer your question?
Totally.
That's good. So we're coming to the end. Is there any, I just want to check in. Is anyone else going on? Okay. So I'm going to turn it to you, Space. We like to summarize maybe your key 3 points that you want us to leave with briefly, just a quick wrap up, so we can take all this wisdom with us. Help us to remember.
So we have another hour.
You said that with love.
Right, that one. You said you were going to talk tonight. The brain is the most important organ. No, I'm just joking. Your embodied state is an invitation to humanness. Your embodied state takes in information. It is the ability to connect or disconnect, to eat, to sleep, to rest, to feel joy, to feel pleasure, to feel anger, to feel sadness, and to feel human. Your body is the pathway to liberation, really fundamentally. When one of us is liberated, doesn't mean everybody's liberated. There's still people not liberated. We don't actually ever get to be fully liberated. This is a collective social experiment to be back into the body. Final point. My husband's like, you have 10 more points, I can see it. Final point. In the 1990s, grandmother Flora Del Mayo from Peru, who works with the 13 indigenous grandmothers, they're an environmental activist group. Look them up, they're so rad. Back in the late 90s, she implored people within wellness communities and light workers and yoga teachers and environmental activists, she implored them, get your feet on the ground. Get your head out of the clouds, get your feet on the ground. And I've really tried to embody that, feet on the ground, And I would share that with everybody, feet on the ground together. That's how things are gonna change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks.